So Nick, there's occasionally a time where when we're going to talk about a film, I want to try and read the book first. It happened with The Keep when we were talking about doing The Keep.
Right,
I like pushed you off of like a month. I was like, you got to give me a month to get into the book first.
I do like that
because I really wanted to read the book first, and that was kind of another issue with the film that we were going to talk about today, Persepolis. Thankfully, even though the book is 350 pages, it's a graphic novel, so I was able to knock through this beast in a week in order to talk about.
Still labor intensive. There's a lot of writing for something that looks very simply drawn.
Oh yeah, and I spent quite a few days outside walking my block and getting my exercise in while reading through this book and almost getting hit. So definitely, I was excited to finally reach out to this film because I've owned this book since college. I took a class where we talked about it, and I said I read it in the class, and I didn't.
It's on film?
Yep, definitely. So there's now a movie.
All right, so today we're going to talk about one of the award-winning.
Yes, this was Academy Award nominated for Best Animated Feature.
I think it did win, didn't it?
No, it didn't win that year. Nope.
It did not win. It got nominated for the 80th Academy Awards, but did a bunch of running. I think it got Best Film for France, for Caesar, Best Editing, and Best Writing. It's won a bunch of awards if you want to look them up. We're going to talk about one of the best, and maybe possibly one of the best animation films ever.
Yeah, Persepolis today. Back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from Goethe Film Reviews.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast, and you already know, like and subscribe, tell your friends, tell your girlfriends, tell your boyfriends, tell everybody about the show. Check out the Patreon for some deals. One as little as $1. You get to tell us what to do, be part of the team, and we actually have some of the options. Yeah. So like and subscribe, comment down below. Also, today we're going to wrap up we continue our series about animation. So today we're going to one of the most successful and critically acclaimed animation films, Persepolis.
Yes, so it's the story of Marjane Satrapi as she navigates growing up in Iran from the late 70s to the early 90s, receiving mixed messages and ever more restricting laws in Iran, particularly for women. Margie searches for purpose and identity while trying to avoid jail or death in her homeland.
So the movie looks a lot like the comic book, and I think the beginning of how they make it into a film, they want to know either do a real version, a live action shot of this, which would be a little bit complicated. But with Marjane wanted to do the film, she wanted to look almost like the comic book, and they had kind of tried how to make it with computers and graphics, how to make it. And I think they went back to old school, if I'm right.
It does have that feeling of paper and ink to it. I don't know. I'm sure they kind of flash in a couple of bits of it. There's a few.
No, there's multiple.
It's
multimedia. So I think a lot of the background is computer, but a lot of the animation of people is drawn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and the choice to make the black and white nature of both the book itself and the film comes down to she wanted the people in the novel and in the film to not feel like they're from Iran, so they're different than everybody else. Like she wanted the film to be accessible to more than people than just Iranian people. She wanted people to look at it and see kind of simplistic drawings. I mean, throughout this book, it's very simple drawings over here, but the idea is that you don't see them as Iranian. You see them as this could be anyone, because this kind of situation could happen to any government.
Right. So this is her growing up from the late 70s all the way up to about, I think, the mid 90s. So I think Marjane's a little bit, we're kind of the same age, pretty much. But she is a refuge. So there's a point in the story where she is in Vienna during the war in Iran. And she's in there in the mid 80s. Now, I want to bring this up because she's actually around right where we talked about Billy the Kid and the Vampire. The Green Blaze Vampire was really popular at the time in the mid 80s. She would have been around that culture in Vienna where that movie was really successful and really playing on the whole subculture, counterculture against what the war is going on.
And you can see that with her friends like Momo and the other ones that she meets when she's out there, as they all could have been cast in that film pretty much.
Yeah, so I'm sure if you mention that movie to her, she will understand what we're talking about with Billy the Kid and the Green Blaze Vampire.
Yeah, and I think the strongest part of the book and the film is the way in which she relates to the larger world. When she's a fan of Iron Maiden and she's a fan of Bruce Lee and kind of those pop cultural things that connect her to, that's where I kind of dug in, is when I read that
subtly interjected, right?
Yeah, and it's never on the nose. There's that whole portion where she's singing "Eye of the Tiger," which does appear in a kind of a version of it inside the book as well, where she is. It's kind of like we get the time period from that. That was almost more successful to me to see kind of her grow through these kind of pop cultural moments than just putting the title cards with the date, because we didn't get that in the book. And so that tethered me to a time period more.
So when you work black and white, you're in subtractive color. You really have to amp up character and story. And like we talked about with Portrait of a Lady on Fire, it's simple, and it's deceivingly. This is actually deceivingly simple because they really work tediously on angles and shots. This could have been really flat and boring, but even when she's sitting on the bed with her boyfriend, it's a low angle. It's looking down from bird's eye view, but it's frame cropped, so it looks intricate, as well as the beds and patterns and everything. So even though it's black and white, and you can tell people, oh, that's gonna look boring, this is actually well made animation.
And it's because it's so strikingly, like, it is simple to look at. But when you think about crafting one of the shots in this film,
that's what I meant.
What you'd have to basically like use with the negative space, with the shading, with really only having like two primaries in white and black and all the shades in between, that would be incredibly difficult. Think about one shot as you watch the film. Think about how you would craft that shot if you were drawing it. It wouldn't necessarily be the same, and in some ways they have to be able to craft a unique looking drawing that guides your eyes to what's important in the shot. And in some points that's getting rid of everything else. At some point that is putting layers of things you didn't expect to be together. It's just, there's a lot of juxtaposition. There's a dreamlike quality to the whole thing where like you're kind of following where they want you to follow, and it's successful in that way as a direction.
So when you get a lot of her narration and a lot of talk about, and when she's in her own little world, she occupies a lot of the screen. And like a kid running around the living room, she's soaking up, absorbing the whole scene, and she's doing the play acting and stuff like that. Even when she's maturing and you have a certain narration of her seeing the world, she occupies. But when she is part of the world, she's very small in the world, and scale is enlarged.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Her viewpoint, and you'll see that too with her viewpoint when she's not in Iran to when she's in Iran. That kind of that closed off everything that is in Iran, and then when she's out, how she kind of like opens up like a flower and is kind of embracing all these things that she couldn't have in her previous time in Iran. I always think about when I watched this. And I saw her going to the supermarket for the first time in Vienna and seeing things on the shelves.
Like a variety, yeah.
And she had choices. And I think even in the book they make a mention about how she like could not get laundry detergent that was scented in Iran. You couldn't get it. So she got it here, and she said that she would always have like 4 or 5 bottles just in case they ever went out again. And it's those little things where we had a similar situation with coronavirus last year where like everything was flying off the shelves to a much smaller extent because she had to live in a world of that. But it's like I understood that need for when you saw a thing of toilet paper and you knew that you were running out, like that joy that you felt. I've never felt toilet paper joy in that way before. So
the whole process of her going through her biography and her life, but there's certain vignettes that I think she still retains that seem a little bit comedic, but a little more interesting. The whole classroom of fighting of, I have a Bee Gees album. Well, I like ABBA, you wimp.
Yeah.
Hey, which is a fun play, but you understand the conflicts that are constantly she's fighting with. Like, who do I belong with? What part of the history do I belong with? And now to the title. The title is not Tehran, where she lives. Grew up. It's Persepolis, which is the ancient city of Iran, which goes back to Persia, the ancient empire of Persia.
Yeah, and it's kind of like I think the film is less successful in portraying kind of like the conflict at the forefront. I think the film is at its best when it's portraying the conflict that is going on in the background.
Yeah.
And as she is trying to just meander through life and growing up. And I think the film kind of hits more of that like growth of her as a character than it hits the conflict. Whereas the book, I think the book spends a lot of time kind of explaining like what this conflict was about. And I'll be honest with you, I was pretty young during a lot of this time, or not even born yet. So this kind of conflict stuff was important for me to actually learn. I think the book is more successful at giving you the details, relating it in a very accessible way. The film, its biggest flaw for me, and the whole reason why I dropped it from a perfect film to a great film, is that it is a rushed film. This is one that packs in, again, 360 pages worth of content, and it tries to get a lot of it in 95 minutes, which is just insane. So what I like about it is that the book is modeled in vignettes, like that you could easily pull out the ones you don't need to.
Right.
I just wish that they maybe had done that with this a little bit more. Is pull out a few more of them and kind of bridge that gap if you're going to do it, or make a longer movie, or better yet, this was released as 2 books, make 2 movies. I hate to say it,
And then the problem is you're going to get an audience, like who's for your audience, because if you do something black and white and you do simple drawings and people like, well, we have a second one, you're going to have to, how do you pitch that, right? Even though it's going to be the content's going to be really good.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously people are like, could restrain. I don't know if I want to sit through another hour or 2 hour movie of black and white. So the selling point, I want to say the content's going to be really good. There's characters and everything's going to be really good. But the selling point of getting people to be interested in it. This movie is also still banned in Iran.
Yeah, in fact, the Iran government was really forceful about trying to get this film not released at multiple locations. Yeah. They didn't have it in their own land. They tried to get other film festivals that were in the Asian marketplace to remove them. And they were actually successful in a couple of those removals too. They really tried hard to get this film out. And what's so frustrating is that I always think if you've got nothing to fear, you've got nothing to hide. And so the fact that they were pushing so much for this film to be removed, saying it was telling lies, tells me that I have to watch it now. It's kind of like when The Interview got that whole thing from Sony, where North Korea was trying to get that film banned. The Interview. I was like, you're just gonna make me want to watch it more.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So I don't think you can still say it in Iran. How they got away with it is it's a French production, I believe.
Yep.
So it's a lot. Even though her story is, I think it's all made in French, and it's a lot of French awards, and I think she played at Cannes, right?
I think it did. It did. Yeah. I was not there, but I think it did. But what's interesting too is you get Chiara. I'm gonna butcher this name. Mastroianni.
Yeah, she does the voice.
And she does the voice of Marjan. Her real life mother, Catherine Deneuve, who I'm in love with, from The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, plays her mother in the movie. And not only that, they both did the French dub and the English dub. So that's what's so great, is because they both had an understanding of it. Because you feel weird. Yeah. You want to see something in its native language as much as you can, but at the same time, I find it easier with animation. I can switch over to a different language and be unaffected. Whereas with live action, I've got to see it in the native language. Animation, I feel like I can do otherwise. But it's nice to have those same 2 strong performers doing both versions.
Also works with it because it does have a lot of scenes. It does breathe a little bit. It does take a little bit of time for it to get its bearings. Mm-hmm. But you have a good fun with animation, even though in black and white. You have the whole montage of her going to a concert. Mm-hmm. You know, the whole montage of her growing up and past puberty, which is obviously a few seconds looks awkward, and of course that's what it is. It's fast and awkward. And I think a lot of it with her interactions with her grandmother work.
Yes. I think that, again, all coming down to the parts of the film that they translate with her life are the best parts of the film. Because, again, I don't think they capture in the film the conflict going on. But I think that they capture her life and what she's dealing with during that time. My favorite part of the movie is her period of time where she's going through these small vignettes of, the men that she's interested in. And it's a little bit different.
I laugh
because it's a good translation, though, from the book. Where one of them he doesn't take her to bed like she's expecting, and then she finds out, I've decided I'm gay. I've realized that now.
Right.
Because if I can't love you, then it must mean that I must be.
In the movie, she's sitting down what is that? Almost. Yeah. What is that?
Yeah. And my wife, who was watching it with me, was just oh no. She was just internally, she was kind of putting herself, and I think that's what's good is that we get a female character here in Marjan who, even though she has a different background, my wife, was able to access those parts of her, and that's the relatability factor. The pop culture is relating through childhood, is that we have different things to us. I didn't run around with nails in my fingers to try and cut somebody because I thought their dad was a bad person, but I did have bad dates, so I think that's
Yeah, so I like this little bit of the party scene where they break up the party, which it's a little bit weird, but you have almost like a Rear Window or Vertigo with on the rooftop.
Oh yeah,
and you see the depth. It's almost like fun. Then you got a little bit of seriousness in there. That's kind of the whole metaphor of the movie. It's a lot of fun, and then serious.
And I think that's because that's what Marjan is dealing with the whole movie.
That's kind of the beat for it.
She's dealing with trying to find a life worth living in a surroundings that is so dour and so bleak. Yeah. The fact that her parents won't leave the country because they don't want to become the lower class somewhere else, you know.
Yeah,
but
they've already had
push her
standing.
there.
No matter how awful thing is, they have some kind of standing.
They don't want to start over because they have a life, even if it's not really the best of them. But they want her to be able to have her life, not their life. And I think that's not something I ever had to deal with. But yeah, it's so palpably understanding from my point of view, where I was able to watch and see what she sees through her eyes, and that's tough. That's tough stuff going on.
The projection of the regiments of the people that are kind of the antagonists or the regiments, they're filmed very symmetrical.
Yep.
If you see, it's very balanced and just rigid, and everything is symmetrical, and they have their place and order and everything. And then anytime you have her socializing out, it's very unbalanced and skewed and fun, and you know, she's out there and animated in the world. And the regiment's always like hardened, stiff, just stuck in this balance, and they can't get out.
And more so than even just stiff, they're all identical in a lot of ways. Like the guys that all come out when she's meeting her boyfriend, and she has to like turn in this guy who is looking at her rear end. The guys that all come out of the truck have the same mustache, the same facial hair, the same hats, the same guns. Like they all hop out the same way. When they do just the silhouettes, it's always the exact same cut. It's like, you know, stormtroopers in Star Wars, where it's like if you just they kind of become like the nameless militia, if you will. And I think, you know, that showcases that from her point of view in this world, these people were kind of just the nameless enemy. They weren't human in the way, you know? Whereas I don't think she's stating that they weren't human ever, but like in her point of view at that time, it was just they were the enemy.
They're stuck to the rules, and the rules are life, and that is the rules, and any outside of the rules that's not living, you have to be part of inside the confined rules, and then you can succeed. Like they always like the teacher, who's actually, she knows that what she's teaching, you kind of hint that she doesn't really believe it, but this is what we have to do and project to the kids, and then she lashes out and everybody applauds her, which is yeah.
Well, and I think again, like that's where I wish there was a little bit more of that book into it, because there's sequences in the book where she relates to her teacher, especially when she's going to art school. It's near the end of the film, where like we get that relationship of like the teacher saying like, you're supposed to break the rules. I can't tell you to do it, but you're supposed to. And so like I really like
that in the
part.
movie.
Yeah, I like that part where they're drawing the person, you know, in the cloak, and like you're not drawing a form. You're drawing a like person in a
Don't
sheet,
show your
you
form,
know?
right? At all. Can't show your form or your hair or whatever.
Yeah.
Don't running. Can't show your running, right? Yeah, like don't look at my butt.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, there's little moments like that too. Like I think just adding a few more things where there's some stuff in there where they talk about how like in the school that she goes to, that the men and women have to take different staircases, and she doesn't understand why. And someone says, because the men are going to look at your butt then, and she's like, and that's my problem. Like that's the stuff where I think beefing up. I don't necessarily think you had to do two movies, although I would have watched both of them. But I think 2 hours would have been okay, because that's where that missing 25 minutes comes in. But I don't think that you're going to lose people going to see Persepolis over 25 extra minutes, because this film is already very clearly not the Pixar, you know, front runner for the Academy Award. This is a very unique style, and I don't think that most people would take their kids to it. I think it's kind of an animation style where it's like, you know what you're going to kind of get into.
Right.
You know?
We talked about it previously, who you're selling it to, because it's animation. It's not a friendly kids movie. You're really going to have some deep dives and metaphors and a lot of investigation of what it growing up in a world and regiment. So there's a lot of dreariness. There's a lot of stuff that's awful. Some really dark stuff.
Yeah.
And then there's also a lot of fun to enjoy. I think you have to be a little more of a teenager up to appreciate the movie, and definitely this is going to be one of those things that it's not for kids. Well, like the elementary kids, even though I think they should watch it.
Well, and I actually, to be true, I had this book given to me in college for a class, and the class was called Writing for Children. It was an elective class that was like a writing-centric class where we read children's novels, children's like books from like young age of 5 to like preteen and teenage.
Are you going to contradict me? Okay.
No, so I kind of agree with you in the sense where it's like we talked about this book in that class, and the translation, we watched some scenes from the movie, and there was kind of that question of like, who's the audience that this is supposed to be for? Because I think that while it deals with some heavy stuff, I'm also one of those people who says, that you can't coddle children when it comes to this kind of stuff. And while I wouldn't have a 5-year-old read this because it's maybe a little too dense, I do think it's a great book for a preteen to a teen.
It's like 12 to up,
Because when you're searching for identity, the best thing you can do is find out that someone who's completely different from you went through the exact same kind of stuff, even if it was a different, background.
Once again, he says it better than I could. So, have you seen Persepolis?
Yes, let us know in the comment section down below. We kind of went in on a deep dive with Persepolis. This is not one that I think is going to be the one that you look at the most often. I was surprised to see it wasn't on Cinefix's top 10 animated movies of all time, but it was kind of in the discussion that I
might have the same criticism as you, that maybe a little bit longer, and I think it's the right. For me, it had hit the right notes where I wanted it to. But
I would have liked to see more purely as a book reader. So I think what we can probably deduce from our 2 point of views is that if you've read the book, you need to go and understand that they will have removed some of the sequences that you maybe enjoyed the most, because that's what happened to me. There's a few sequences that I think would have really added to and pumped up some stuff, and there's just a few tiny moments of translation that I don't think worked as well. Like the scene where they're running on the roof works, but it's the final moments of that scene that they kind of pull back and they kind of hide from what's happening.
That's a little more
that they could have showed like they did in the book.
When you cut that, it looks a little more safe.
Yeah, when we were watching the suicide scene, the suicide attempt scene, if you will, my wife was watching with me, and I knew what was going on, but she kind of actually got lost in that, and she was like, "Did she try to kill him?" Like, she kind of like had to work through that. And I was like, "Yeah," and I was like, "But they didn't do it the way they did in the book."
Okay,
so it's just kind of those translational pieces that I think would have reached it there. But I think if you've read the book, know that there will be some sequences that you maybe like that won't be in it. If you haven't read the book, I do think you will enjoy the film regardless.
Okay.
So it's kind of go into it with those kind of tempered expectations, and then let us know, have you read the book first? Did you watch the movie first? Have you done both? Have you done neither? We want to hear about it. Comment down below. Don't forget, like, subscribe, share this video. It's a free thing you can do that does so much for our show and for our channel. And check out that Patreon.
Yeah.
Folks, that's it for us today. You can find all my film reviews on GoFilmReviews.com.
You can find my podcast, St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts.